Alright, my name is Roman Kalinovski, and these are 4 pieces from a new body of work that I've been working on since the middle of August. But the story actually starts a bit before that. I would say it starts in the year 2001, when I was cutting class in high school to work on a video game in RPG Maker, and which I never actually did finish because the data got corrupted, but that's another story.
That's 2 of us.
And but even though the data got corrupted, I kept on working on the world in which I had envisioned the story taking place. It's a world called Neath, and the main conceit of this kind of fantastic world is that there is no day and night cycle. It's a world that's tidally locked to a star, and the height of the sun in the sky is based on distance rather than time. And so every single culture in this world has its own means of representing time, and it's culturally specific, and there is no universal sense of time. So even though I never finished that actual game I had started with it, I kept on building this world in my head. I had some Word documents and things. I kept on working on it. In the background, I was doing other stuff. You know, I got into art school, started painting, and then fast forward to 2009 when after I graduated undergrad at Syracuse, I moved to New York City, and I started working at Knoedler & Company, which was the oldest art gallery in the United States. And they had this incredible archive on the 6th floor of their building. It was it was right next to the Frick collection on Madison Avenue. And yeah, I loved working in that archive. It was so great because I love books, I love reading, and it was really great to be able to surround myself with that. And as it turns out, Knoedler had a bit of a dark side. People probably might know about this. Unbeknownst to me, but apparently very well known to the gallery director, they were selling forged paintings. Motherwell's, Pollock's, Rothko's, yes. And
all made in Queens.
All made in Queens, yes.
Queens. Not too far from here, too. Local, artisanal.
Yeah, when the story broke and the resulting scandal basically crashed the gallery, I wasn't working there at the time. I had already quit to move to Los Angeles for a complete boondoggle, and but finding out about what was going on with that, and knowing that all this really shady stuff is going on right under my feet, it left an impression on me. And fast forward.
You were working there while the whole. Oh
my
man.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, one of my good friends, he was actually art handling there. I haven't actually asked him if he ever handled the.
He must have.
I imagine he must have.
By the way, there's a beautiful documentary about this whole Knoedler scam and the Chinese artist who was making those paintings. And he was a professor.
Wow.
And he was an accomplished painter.
God.
So, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, but what's the documentary? Look it up. I don't know what's called.
But yeah, so the whole Knoedler scandal sort of stayed in my mind, and bubbles up on my thoughts occasionally. And there was a point during the pandemic where I started sort of world building with Neath again, and sort of getting back into it because there wasn't a lot else to do at that time. And so I started coming up with brainstorming ideas for new stories to set in this world. And I for whatever reason, the Knoedler thing popped into my head, and I thought, wouldn't that be interesting to have a sort of an art forgery story set in this kind of Baroque underground city in a world of no sense of time. So that's when I started playing around with it. And I thought, let's do a short story. Do a quick short story based on this. And 100,000 words later, I had a draft of a novel. That was summer of 2022. So not this past summer, but the last summer. And so yeah, I wrote about 100,000 words, and I only really quit. I didn't actually finish it. I quit when I gave myself tendinitis from typing so fast, and I had to take a break, and I lost momentum, and the art world started back up. I had a gallery to run. I had all sorts of stuff going on, and sort of lost some of my momentum with it. But I kept the draft on my computer. I would pick away at it once in a while, and it sort of stayed in my mind. This story. It's called The Vaster Conspiracy, and it's basically this is the main character, Vaster Vrain, who is an art counterfeiter. He's not the one who does the forgeries himself. That's somebody else, but he's the one who basically forges the provenances of the paintings by inserting fake records into archives in order to make it look as if it's a legitimate work. And in order to sell more of the forgeries, he starts coming up with this conspiracy theory around the work in order to market it. But then he turns out there's an actual secret society which he ends up implicating, and then they start coming after him. Or at least he thinks they're coming after him. So fast forward to this past summer, I was working on a body of work, and I kind of burned out on it. I showed it here at the DigiAna Studio back in April, and I showed it also again in Connecticut in June. And after that, I just kind of burned out on that whole body of work and was looking for new stuff to do. And I did a few self-portraits, and I started working in charcoal with those, just for sake of speed, just get something on the paper. And I ended up really liking the charcoal more than I remembered ever liking charcoal before. So, and then as I was sort of coming up with ideas for new work to make, a new body of work, I sort of thought, well, what about the story? What about bringing some of that and visualizing some of these characters as a way to sort of get to know the story better? And that's where this started. I started with Vaster, and I ended up with this whole motley crew of characters. And the medium is mostly charcoal, but some of them also have Conte crayon and graphite and this weird black chalk that my girlfriend found for me at a studio clearance. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but it has a really cool effect. So, and then on top of that, when I finished the painting, I put white gouache for the highlights. And these are all on drafting vellum, so they're quite delicate, which is why, well, one of the reasons why they're framed. The other reason is because I love Baroque frames, and they sort of ties into the very Baroque themes in the work and in the story as well.
Yeah, it totally works with the image.
Yeah, I love the frames. They're great.
Thank you.
Like in any other context, it may not, but here it does.
Yeah.
Right?
So I'm going to read from the manuscript, and one thing which has been as a result of working on these pieces is that I've been inspired to go back into the manuscript and work in some ideas that have come to me as I've been visualizing them. And so it's been kind of a bit of a loop. It's been an interesting process of kind of give and take between the book and the imagery from it. So this scene inspired this piece, Sinahilda praying at the shrine of Luca. And the other characters in the scene are Vaster the counterfeiter, and Mesa, who is a foreign woman to whom Vaster sold a forged painting. Mesa pushed open the shrine's large wooden doors. A cloud of perfumed smoke poured out onto the street, catching in Vaster's airway and forcing out a cough. The interior of the shrine was lit by hundreds of small candles nestled in decorative niches carved into the walls, the tiny flames reflecting from the shine black marble floor. The room was circular, with a large white pillar in the center, reaching from the floor to the ceiling, made of carved, highly polished marble. In front of the pillar, facing the door, was a platform holding a gilded wooden lectern with a large, ornately bound book on it. Next to the lectern was a large candle. Molten tallow dripped down its sides, most of it caught by a tall, gilded candle holder with greasy white splotches dotting the floor around the base. Mesa led Vaster around to the far side of the pillar, where a woman sat in a chair reading a small leather-bound book. She was wearing a Zillion-style dress with a top made of 4 panels sewn together with gold thread. Over the 4-panel top, she wore a black velvet capelet dripping with swirling golden embroidery. "Brought someone back of you, Mesa?" The woman didn't look up from her book. Mesa giggled. "Oh, this is Vaster. He sold me the painting I told you about and carried it here for me." The woman lowered her book and looked up at Vaster. Her pale blonde hair was long and straight, and her eyebrows were nearly invisible against skin that likely hadn't seen the sun in star cycles. A few faded freckles across the bridge of her nose were the only evidence that she had ever been touched by the sun at all. Mesa turned to face Vaster. "This is Sinahilda, one of the priestesses who oversees the shrine." Vaster bowed his head. "Pleased to meet you, Your Holiness." Sinahilda burst out laughing. "That's a new one. Nobody's ever called me that before." Vaster forced a laugh. "This is all very foreign to me. How am I supposed to address you? Just Sinahilda's fine. She giggled. But I like this Your Holiness thing. Maybe I'll start making people call me that. Is this the niece you told me about, Mesa? Oh, no, I think Nicole is out teaching now, isn't she? Sinahilda nodded. You just missed her. Mesa leaned in and examined the cover of Sinahilda's book, which featured golden Zalian letters embossed on the brown leather. Oh, did Tekla send you more books? I don't know how she gets away with misusing shrine funds and sending these all the way from Zabul, but I appreciate it. There are shrines all the way in Zabul? Sinahilda chuckled. There are shrines in every city on Neath. The enshrinement maintains the goddess Luca's presence in the world, all across the world. The enshrinement. I have a question about that. Sinahilda set her book on her lap and looked up at Vaster. Your Holiness is listening. I accidentally bought a reliquary at an auction. Sinahilda's eyes widened. How do you accidentally buy something at an auction? Long story, but I got stuck with the bill and the reliquary. Whose remains are in it? Linvina the healer. Sinahilda laughed. Of course it's one of those. Shaped like a tooth, right? Vaster nodded. It's a joke among us priestesses. Linvina had more teeth than the rest of the return put together. So you're saying it's a fake? Unless someone stole it from the shrine in Lanzinger and sold it here. That's the only real one as far as I know. Sinahilda stood up. Here, let me show you what a real reliquary looks like. Vaster and Mesa followed Sinahilda to a pillar in the back of the shrine. Mounted on it was an ornate gilded box at the top of corbel. Inside the box was a small marble statuette of a nude woman clutching a crystal in her hands. A brass plaque engraved with Zalian letters was set below the statuette. What does this say? Sinahilda turned to face Vaster. Ever rolled of the burned? Vaster shook his head. Well, you're about to. This reliquary contains a piece of her skin. Where is it? Sealed away inside. What's the point of having it if you can't see it? Gotta have faith, Sinahilda smirked. Everilda is a return who blesses converts. Most overseas shrines have one of these. What happens if they run out of skin? What happens if Linvina runs out of teeth? Sinahilda grinned. Everilda lived in Neolenia during the conversion of the land, and converted to the faith after running away from home. She wanted to become a priestess, but she had tattoos all over her body that disqualified her. What's wrong with tattoos? I could summarize the long theological debates on that topic, but I'd be talking until all the candles burn out. Sinahilda smiled. Goddess Luca says you can't have them. That's as good a reason as any. So did she ever become a priestess? Sinahilda nodded. She was so distraught that she shed all her clothes and stood out in the sun wearing nothing but a phylactery, loudly petitioning the goddess to burn off all her tattoos of her purifying light. A phylactery? Sinahilda held up the crystal pendant she wore around her neck. One of these. Lets the goddess hear our prayers when we're away from shrines or relics. Anyway, Everilda stood there praying in the sun for an entire passage. Sounds like quite the spectacle. When she returned to the shrine when the bells rang for the illumination, all of her tattoos had disappeared. Sinahilda smirked. Talk about a sunburn. So she became a priestess after all. Sinahilda nodded. And after she died, she was declared returned. Went back to the goddess's presence of her spirit completely intact. Sinahilda turned to face Mesa. Could you check if the candle's still lit? Mesa nodded and walked around the pillar. Yeah, still burning. Is it bad if it goes out? It would be a disaster. It means I'd have to light it again, which means I'd have to do work. Mesa laughed. The candles are time for us. Each one represents a passage from the 4 books of apparitions, kind of like an arc in your star time. You find meaning in the procession of the stars from the sky, and we find it in the gradual reading of our holy text, passage by passage. I don't believe the stars do anything other than shine out past the dark. We can't even see them down here. Vaster shook his head. My boss at the gallery takes it way too seriously. Consults an augur to make sure the stars are right before doing anything. If he finds solace in believing that all of history is written in the stars, then he's doing better than most people out there who have no greater meaning at all. Vaster nodded. Sinahilda gestured towards the pillar in the center of the shrine. Why don't we all pray together before we go and unpack Mace's painting? Vaster shook his head. I'm not sure how. Sinahilda took Vaster's hand and led him around the pillar, stopping in front of the large tallow candle. There's no right or wrong way to do it. You don't even have to pray to Luca. You can pray to the stars, or to your ancestors, or to nothing at all. Just give yourself a moment of vulnerability. As Sinahilda and Mesa whispered words in a language he didn't understand, Vaster stared at the gleaming pillar, at the flickering candlelight bouncing from its white polished surface, at the red dancing flame atop the tallow candle and the liquefied fat oozing down its sides and sizzling as it hit the cool metal pan of the candle holder. He held his other hand open and imagined her hand in it, stubby little fingers pressing into his palm. The burning wax and fatted incense caught in his throat as he remembered the last time he saw her. Another bead of fat liberated itself from the tip of the candle and worked its way down. Maybe she was somewhere better, somewhere with greater freedom and less pain. Somewhere where his own failures and fuck-ups couldn't hurt her anymore. The bead of fat fell from the candle and hit the pan with a soft sizzle. Sinahilda released Faster's hand. Do you feel better? Not really. Good. Sinahilda turned to face Faster. Faith isn't for feeling good about yourself. If that was all there was to it, I'd have the easiest job on me. No, we're all hurting others and ourselves over and over again because there's something fundamentally wrong with us. Something inherent to existence that we can't fix. Something that nobody can fix. Not yourself, or a lover, or a priestess, or even the goddess. Not in this life, at least. That's depressing. So how do you fix it then? Sinahilda shook her head. You don't. You can't. Because that's who you are. That's who we all are. Take away that little kernel of misery and failure, and each of us would crumble to ashes. It takes faith to find ways to work around it, to live with it, and live with each other. That takes faith. It takes something irrational and unexplainable to bridge that gap between yourself and who you could be, or between yourself and someone else. A leap of faith. I read the words of the goddess Zelian war criminals, fleeing justice for atrocities committed on Rhodinian battlefields. I pray alongside mercenaries who will stomp the dead or halfway to death and then walk through these doors, blood still wet on their uniforms, and beg for the goddess's forgiveness time after time. And I see an endless cycle of drunks looking for a quiet place to sleep things off. Maybe none of us can change who we are. Maybe the best we can do is all be alone together under the candlelight for a little while. But at least we're doing something, trying to build something, together. It might help carry the weight of our sins and grief. Faster stared at Sinahilda for a moment, and looked down at the red flame of the tallow candle. Another bead of fat started its journey downward. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Are you going to get that published?
I would like to.
Yeah.
I'd like to finish my second draft at some point.
Yeah, yeah.
Up to about 20,000 words on it, so it's, it's coming along.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wish somebody would do a book or a show about unfinished RPGs.
That would be interesting, yes.
I think some of the, not including myself, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of really awesome people who at some point in their lives have started designing an RPG that is entirely quirky and their own world extrapolated into a game world.
Yeah, right.
And then never finished it. Right?
So you sort of fall off the edge of the world because it's not finished.
It's not finished.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I have one from I made with my best friend in high school.
Yeah, I made mine when I was supposed to be in high school.
And we never finished it. And this best friend of mine is a cotton merchant.
Wow.
He sells textiles.
Far out.
Half the way around the world, right? And here I am. But in high school, we wanted to make an RPG.
Shit.
Right?
That's so cool.
So I think somebody ought to write a book or a show about unfinished RPGs. Because I think
Or a documentary or something.
Or a documentary.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I think there's some fascinating backstories.
Totally.
And material there.
Yeah, and the reasons why things weren't finished, for myself, it was because my memory cards got corrupted and I just didn't have enough backups. And
The reason for me was my buddy didn't do anything. I wrote all the code.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it.
And then at some point he was like, we're done. But it was his computer. I didn't have a computer.
Yeah.
So I was writing it on his computer.
Far out.
Yeah.
Wow.
That kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Early days of digital.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.